one of the last conversations in the movie includes discussion about the end of the world, and there are other allusions in the film to the approaching end of the century, end of the millennium. What was sort of kicking around in your head as you started to embark on this?
As far as that aspect is concerned, you just referred to, we made the film in 1992. It was released the following year. And at that time, some of you will remember, it started to occur to me, that the millennium was on the horizon. And of course there was all that talk about, the end of the world, and even when I was in kids' school, back in about 1952 or something, the headmaster would say to our year group, when you are all 56, will be the next total eclipse, which was the great total eclipse of 1999. And he then had he would talk about the impending doom of the eclipse, the end of the century, all that stuff. So that was, I kind of, in the early 90s, people weren't quite talking about it yet. I mean, people weren't, but, so that was one aspect of one of the preoccupations that I thought Johnny should have, really.
And I think probably most people by now have a sense of the part of your process is sitting down with actors and asking them about people that they know, and that eventually this is whittled down into kind of the DNA of the character that you're going to create. What was it about the idea of a character like Johnny, and somebody particularly with his kind of verbal and intellectual prowess that made him the right vessel to channel those ideas?
It's a complex thing to talk about. I mean, one of the important things I think about Johnny is he's obviously, to me, a victim of a lousy education system. Because here's a bright kid who, if his teachers hadn't just punished him every time he opened his mouth, but instead they'd have encouraged him, all this intelligence and this hunger and thirst for knowledge and attitudes to stuff could have been put in. He could have gone to university and less of the outsider than he is. But apart from anything else, Johnny represents a kind of mentality, frustration, etc., which we will remember and is still around. He's a waste, but it's all going on, and there was the other aspect of the film. When we first released the film, it was accused by a minority of feminists of being a misogynistic film. It is not a misogynistic film. Johnny is not a misogynist, and in fact I've deliberately, of course, created a character in the film who is absolutely 100% gilt-edged misogynist by way of Jeremy, the landlord. But Johnny is more complex. You have to understand Johnny, I would suggest, in a much more complex and sophisticated way than merely writing him off as a misogynist. He doesn't know how to deal with his impulses in some contexts, but then he does. I mean, you can see that he actually, he does actually really relate to and in some way love Louise, and so on. it's very complex, really, and hard to talk about in simplistic terms.
You had worked with David Thewlis before in Short and Curly's, which was shown tonight, and also in Life is Sweet. Did you have the idea that he was someone you wanted to put at the center of the film, or is that something that comes later in the process after you've kind of figured out what that character is?
No, well, actually, it's quite straightforward. He did. You saw his earlier hilarious performance in The Short and Curly's, which we might talk about briefly if you want. And then he was in Life is Sweet. In Life is Sweet, he plays the boyfriend of the anorexic twin daughter, who shows up at the house when nobody else is there, when they're all at work, and nicks chocolate off her tits, because that's what she likes to have. And he shows up twice. Like all the actors in my films, he was there available to develop the character further. And I thought that I was going to bring him in at the end in some way. But it began to be clear to me that would be a red herring, and that it wouldn't get us anywhere. It would be a nuisance dramatically, because it's about the family resolving their own problems. So he only wound up with 2 scenes in the film, about which he was cool, that was part of the deal. But sometime after we'd made Life is Sweet, I had a drink with him and I said, do you want to do another film? And he said, well, I hate to say this, but how do I know the same thing won't happen again? So I said, I guarantee whatever happens, you'll have a good slice of the cake. And that's this. And then, I thought, I mean, already on the film, on The Short and Curly, you can see, I said, we have this idea, okay, this is one of those guys who is a compulsive bad joke maker. So he simply absorbed all these books you can get, little books of jokes. I mean, it was coming out of his ears, not only his ears. I mean, so this capacity to absorb stuff and then to regurgitate it through the character, I knew was a skill that he had. A very intelligent guy, of course. And so, that was something that was obviously worth exploiting in this. And to answer your question, the idea was to get a film and build a film around a central character that he would play.
Because I think it's something that's not talked about enough when your films are talked about, I want to ask specifically about the cinematography in the film and your collaboration with Dick Pope. And I think right from the beginning, the movie announces the visual language of the film as being very different from the films that you had made previously, in terms of the use of a kind of restless, moving camera that recurs frequently.
Yes.
How you came up with the look of the movie.
Yes, I mean, I have to say, just as a detail to what you just said, I mean, on the whole, this film is not shot with a restless moving camera. I mean, the first scene is.
And the last.
And the last scene is, yes, it's not a restless moving camera. It is steady cam. But the real answer to the question is there's always a point during the development when I'm working with the actors, creating the premise of the film, and relationships and the backstory and all the rest of it. We agree always, we always have a date on which I will sit down with Dick Pope, the cinematographer, and the designer. In this case it was Alison Chitty, who's a great opera designer, and share with them what I think is evolving. And in this particular case, Naked, I said, well, it's this guy on a solo journey, it's kind of nocturnal, it's monochromatic in some way. And so he shot tests, decided to do a thing that's called bleach bypass, which misses out. This is, of course, film we're talking about, pre-digital stuff. which gives us this coloured but monochromatic colour mood. It was brilliant actually, and worth mentioning in passing, of course, that he died. Dick Pope died about 2 months ago, which is a great loss. Been very ill. And he was able to do that in different ways on all of the films, you know, from the Victorian theatre stuff of topsy-turvy to the bold, bright colours of happy-go-lucky, etc. You know.
Can you talk a little bit about someone else who sadly is also no longer with us, Catherine Cartledge, who's so magnificent in this film, playing Sophie, and who also, of course, starred for you in Career Girls, and sort of how you discovered her and what the process was like.
I saw her in the theatre, and then I auditioned her and all that usual thing. She was a highly original actor. She was, she had a great sense of humour, brilliant at characters. She knew these kind of girls, you know, that Sophie is. She died at the age of 39, suddenly, out of the blue, you know, with no medical precursor. And it's a great loss. And I could say with pretty confidently that had she lived, you would now know her as a film director, because that's what she wanted to do, that's what she was going to do. That's all I would say. And she was great to work with, and she is. She delivers the goods in this film very thoroughly.
It occurred to me looking at the film again, since it's made 32 years ago, and Johnny says in the movie that he's 27 years old, that if, you know, he were with us till today, this character would be almost 60. Do you ever think about what might have become of this character?
Like you asked me. It's interesting that you say if he was still alive. When we showed this film in the New York Film Festival, the first question came from an old guy who said, "Mr. Leigh, do you think Johnny is dead within an hour of the end of the film?" I said, "No." I said, "That's up to you." So maybe that will be the case, in which case he certainly wouldn't be in his 60s now. But no, I don't think about that. It is interesting, but on the whole academic, really.
I would love to take some questions from the audience. I'm sure we can start over there. And I think we have a microphone.
Like nothing else on earth. Well, we did on this film what I do on all of my films, which is to start with nothing and to create characters. The whole thing is going on a journey of discovering what the film is during the process of making it. So a substantial length of time, I think probably around 6 months, was spent developing the characters and the relationships through discussion and improvisation and research, etc. And then going on location for however many weeks it was, probably, I think probably about 10, 12 weeks or something. Building the film as we went along, doing scene by scene, sequence by sequence, location by location, working without the crew, improvising, and then through rehearsals, scripting it very precisely, and then being rejoined by the crew and shooting it in a very disciplined way. What you might find interesting is that when we got to the end of the film, we actually couldn't decide how it should end because there were a number of options. Does he stay? Does he go? Does he go back with Louise? What does he do? And unusually, I couldn't get it really. I mean, all the options were possible, but I couldn't quite get what was dramatically, thematically exactly right. I used to drive to the location in my car and drive down the road, seeing the house with the apartment in it at the end of the street. I didn't particularly pay any attention, there it was. And then one morning I was driving and I clocked the house and I suddenly saw what you see, which is him hobbling down the street, because obviously he'd been injured. I just had this image, I just saw it. And of course, once I had that thought, it was obvious, it was inevitable, it was non-negotiable, and David absolutely said, of course, yeah, that's what I said. He nicks the money, and he fucks off down the street. Cut to black, you don't know what's going to happen next. End of.
Yeah, way in the back there.
Hi, well, first off, it's an honor, you're one of my favorite filmmakers, so just even the chance to do this is amazing. Thank you so much. I guess I was curious about Jeremy, that character, because I think it's so interesting. You have Johnny, who's this sort of lower class guy, and you have the character Jeremy, who's very, wealthy, very clean, put together, and they kind of look at the world the same way.
Do they? How is it the same way?
Not the same, I mean, I guess from when I was watching, they kind of have, I don't know if they look at the world the same way. They kind of walk, there's like a weird, they're totally different people, but there is a bit of a similarity.
What's the similarity? I'm serious. I mean, you're asking the question, and I want to be able to answer it, but I haven't bought the premise of it yet. I'm asking you. When you say you look at them in the same way, what is that same way that they look at the world?
I mean, I guess there's a certain attitude. Again, that's why I was just curious about the character of the character Jeremy. Maybe my outlook on it is wrong. I was just curious. I'm just curious about that character, because it's so, just the jarringness of the two of them. I know I just said they were kind of similar, but I was so fascinated by that character.
I don't quite know how to answer your question because I don't know what the question is, but thank you. Well, I mean, to try and be helpful about what you just said, I mean, Jeremy is a completely nihilistic, selfish, destructive guy. Now, what you may be saying is that you may see something of what I've just said in Johnny, but he isn't those things. He's frustrated. I'm just going to digress for a moment. If you're familiar with my film, Happy-Go-Lucky, the central character in that, which Sally Hawkins plays, Poppy, is a very outgoing, highly intelligent, generous, good-humoured, but fundamentally serious teacher and enabler, and so on and so forth. I realised after I'd made Happy-Go-Lucky that in fact, she's the kind of, in a way, she's a sort of, as it were, a kind of sibling to Johnny. Now, you may say, well, she's totally different. He's negative, she's positive, but that is the point. They are both idealists. Johnny is an idealist, but he's a frustrated idealist. He's an idealist who is disappointed with the world. Whereas Poppy is an idealist and she acts on it. She makes things, she does the best she can with it. Jeremy is not an idealist, but was a nihilist. And I hope in some way that addresses itself to what you say.
Here in the front.
Right. My question is, with regards to your very specific way of developing your projects, the improvisation and the working with the actors closely over the months, if and when you find that a character is approaching a certain literary archetype, like for example, I think of the picaresque when I'm thinking of Johnny, you know, this highly intelligent but perhaps downtrodden character. Is that something that, when you identify that maybe, do you steer towards it or away from it?
Neither, really. I mean, it's not about that. My job as a storyteller, as a director and as a writer, as a dramatist, is to arrive at a coherent, well-structured, hopefully meaningful experience. But in order to arrive at that, I do what painters do, novelists do, dramatists, poets, musicians, sculptors, etc., which is to embark on a journey of discovery as to what the final thing is by making a mark and reacting to the mark and putting input into what's going on and being drawn, reacting to what goes on, which puts you in a new direction you hadn't thought of, etc., etc. All art involves a synthesis of improvisation and order. You know, whether you paint or write or whatever you do, you start off by improvising and then you put order on it. So in terms of your question, that's the job. So yeah, things will happen where I guide it, it's going in one direction, and I kind of, by dealing with the language of what motivates the characters, and you can just, well, instead of this motivating, could it be that? Yes, of course I guide it, but at the same time I draw from it and learn from it, and I'm stimulated into an instinct about what should happen next or what should happen instead of this that's happening. I think this is what you're talking about.
Yes.
But that's in the nature of the creative process. Does that answer your question?
It does, yes. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, I do.
Can you talk about the transition?
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Great meeting you. I went to the London Film School, and you were the chairman at the time, so great meeting you now.
Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, thank you for apologizing, because I signed a petition to get you resigned, but thank you.
He's joking, by the way.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. But thank you, you're such a hero of mine. And I just wanted to know, what do you think about the transition in the film industry between, the old school ways and the new school ways? And it seems like it was difficult for everyone in your generation. And Les Blair, who was a teacher of mine, seemed to have a real big issue with dealing with the changes of the industry. So can you talk a little bit about that?
What do you, give him the microphone back. What do you really you're referring to?
I just feel like Les Blair was like old school ways, he was kind of like forcing these old school structures against, us?
I don't really know, to be honest, I don't really know what exactly you're referring to or talking about. I can't really answer that. I'm not too sure what that's about, really.
No, so basically what I'm saying is, you're such a great filmmaker, and you're basically, it's a new industry that you can't be as hard on people with your crew and your cast, and it's a changed industry. So how do you feel about dealing with, actors and your crew during this new industry?
I'm stuck. I am.
No worries.
Has your way of making films
Exactly,
changed very
yeah.
much?
Yeah, exactly.
Has my way of things changed as a result of other things? you mean?
Yeah, exactly. How is your way of working with actors and crew members?
Has it changed?
Exactly, yeah.
Not fundamentally, no. So I'm having a sort of out-of-body experience. I thought I was at a screening of Naked in, is it Los Palmas?
I think we have time for one more, and we'll go.
I'll take a less esoteric question.
This is all on you, audience member in the back.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the answers to your questions, to the questions that are coming, because they're a lot like your films. They're honest, they're probing, and they're uncomfortable. And I love that you deal with ideas. And so I appreciate your answers.
Thank you. I hope that I'm about to say something that will make you very uncomfortable. I don't know what it is.
Before we leave, can we say something about, or can you say something about, because I think we'd be remiss to leave this movie without saying something about Peter White, who has such a fantastic moment in this movie as the Night Watchman.
Peter White is a terrific actor, and we screened Green Time before, which was his first appearance. Again, I mean, the notion of creating this security guard, who in many ways is a match for Jonathan in terms of, it's got ideas, the guy reads books, and it's all going on in his head. Some of it is absolutely questionable, not least his notion about the future life and all the rest of it, and his past, all that. But Peter White, is a consummate character actor who, again, he absorbed all kinds of stuff to get that, to bring out in Johnny. I mean, I just want an interesting thing which I'll share with you about the office block that he's guarding. We created the character and the situation and things in our rehearsal period. We explored the relationship with Johnny, but my natural assumption was that he is guarding a working office block with desks and computers and stuff and all the rest of it, telephones and all that. Alison Chitty, who I've said is a brilliant designer, came rushing in one day and she said, "What about if he's guarding an empty office block with nothing there? Because I found one and it's available." And I thought, this is brilliant. It's much more appropriate to what the film is about. Just guarding nothing.
And is it true that he got so into the role that he wanted to keep researching and
Yeah, it is
through
true.
craft?
Yeah, I'd forgotten that actually. No, he finished his job on the film, and that was the end of that. We'd done all that, and a couple of weeks later, or whatever it was, we were still shooting other stuff. And my assistant said, "Oh, Peter White wants to know if he can still claim expenses for the more research he's doing." We had to say no. We had to say no. Fuck off with that. That'd be outrageous. But you'd have to respect him for it.
Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you.